Look closely at these raised arms and heavy chains. Every year, on the 10th of Muharram, a day known as Ashura, millions of Shia Muslims gather to publicly grieve, while Sunnis observe quiet fasts. To understand the weight of this grief, we must travel back to 680 CE. The Islamic Empire was facing a massive political crisis. The Caliph Muawiyah had bypassed the traditional merit-based system of choosing a leader and instead established a hereditary dynasty, passing absolute power directly to his son Yazid. Yazid was deeply unpopular, a ruler focused strictly on maintaining his own dominance rather than upholding the values of the empire. Recognizing the threat this posed to the core principles of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad's own grandson, Imam Hussain, flatly refused to legitimize Yazid's rule. That refusal led to a brutal standoff in the scorching deserts of Karbala. Hussain, traveling with his family and a small band of supporters, was intercepted and entirely surrounded by Yazid's massive state army. Yazid's forces deliberately cut off their access to water. After days of agonizing thirst, Hussain and his 72 companions were slaughtered in the sand. That intense sacrifice left an undeniable scar on Islamic history. The tragedy of Karbala forever cemented Ashura as a day of profound mourning and remembrance. While Karbala defines how the world sees this day today, the 10th of Muharram was already considered holy thousands of years before Hussain was born. The very word Muharram comes from an Arabic root meaning sacred. Long before Islam, the ancient Arabs around the Kaaba observed 4 distinct months where drawing a sword or fighting a war was strictly forbidden. Decades before Karbala, when the Prophet Muhammad migrated to Medina, he noticed a specific tradition among the local Jewish population. Every year on the 10th day of Muharram, they held a strict fast. When asked why they observed this date, the Jewish elders called it a day of thanksgiving. They were fasting to commemorate a massive ancient deliverance, where God saved their ancestors from a brutal tyrant. Hearing this, the prophet declared that Muslims had a shared claim to this ancient prophetic legacy. He adopted the fast of Ashura, making it a recommended practice for his own followers. For that first generation of Muslims, Ashura was defined by this shared Abrahamic legacy of rescue, rather than the historical tragedy that would follow decades later. To find the origin of that rescue, we go back thousands of years to ancient Egypt. At the peak of its empire, the nation was ruled by Pharaoh, an absolute monarch who demanded his subjects worship him as a literal god. He backed up that claim with immense brutality. Pharaoh systemically enslaved the Israelites, forcing generations of people into grueling manual labor while executing their newborn sons to prevent any rebellion. The man who finally challenged that authority was Moses, armed with nothing but a wooden staff and an unshakable belief in his Lord. He walked into the palace and told Pharaoh to let his people go. Eventually, Moses led the Israelites out of the city, but their escape was cut short. They reached the shores of the Red Sea, only to realize Pharaoh had dispatched his entire elite military force to slaughter them. Pressed against the turbulent water with chariots closing in, the crowd panicked. But Moses didn't waver. He insisted God would provide a way out. In that desperate moment, a divine command came down. God ordered Moses to take his simple wooden staff and strike the surface of the sea. The water instantly split, exposing a dry path through the seabed. The Israelites rushed across. When Pharaoh's army tried to follow, the water collapsed, completely destroying the Egyptian military and drowning their tyrannical king. According to tradition, that incredible triumph of an enslaved people over an arrogant dictator occurred precisely on the 10th of Muharram. That is the foundational miracle of Ashura. Pharaoh and Yazid both operated on a similar structural logic. They placed the total weight of their empires behind a single demand: absolute submission to their personal authority over the truth. Facing them were 2 men who refused to bend. Moses and Hussain both stared down overwhelming military forces with absolute faith, accepting the physical danger rather than compromising their principles. Moses was granted a physical miracle to lead his people to safety. Hussein's sacrifice worked differently. By refusing to surrender even when surrounded, he forced Yazid's state to reveal its own brutality to the entire Muslim world. That refusal delegitimized Umayyad dynasty in the eyes of history, securing a victory of principle that outlasted the soldiers who killed him. Looking at the physical act of the miracle, a question arises. God could have split the Red Sea with a thought. Why wait for Moses to strike the water with a wooden staff? Because faith requires participation. The lesson is that you have to make an active effort, no matter how small or seemingly useless your weapon is against the waves, before the path opens. Ashura spans from the shores of the Red Sea to the sands of Karbala. It teaches us that when facing absolute tyranny, mourning is only part of the equation. You must take the first strike, hold the line against impossible odds, and trust the divine with the final outcome.